Hello and welcome to today's webcast on AI-enabled path to competitive advantage brought to you by Insight and Microsoft. Below this webcast, you will see an attachments tab where you can navigate to after this webinar. There you can find additional information on assets on today's topic. I would now like to turn over this presentation to our speaker, Carm Taglianti, Insight's Chief Data Officer. Carm, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Carter, and thank you everyone for attending. Certainly having a very interesting conversation today. So we'll be talking about AI-enabled path to competitive advantage. And from a background perspective, I've been in the industry for quite some time, and I've been dabbling certainly in the area of cloud computing, data science, data analytics for forever, it seems. But now all of these different capabilities are coming together, which is really interesting. And many organizations are using them for competitive advantage. In addition to being a practitioner, I also teach at Northeast University, where I teach these kinds of classes and subjects to students that are looking to learn. And so it's really exciting for me, and it's an exciting time, I think, for everybody in this space. So if we look at what are some of the capabilities or core competencies that are required in order to be able to create these kinds of solutions that allow us to generate competitive advantage, we really think about just a number of core competencies or expertise areas. And here I'm just talking about the capabilities Insight has, but they align to the kinds of capabilities you would need regardless to be able to be successful in this space. So in general, I'll kind of focus on data AI because the underlying data platform is really going to be super important to AI that you might use to create competitive advantage. Security right below it is always going to be important, of course, as we think about protecting our data and also the results of our decision making, especially as it relates to AI and responsible use of AI, as well as the results that are being shared or communicated to our customers. And then modern applications, another key area that I'll talk about, is related to, well, how do you then embed this AI into your applications to make it actionable? And that's an important part of understanding how not only we approach this, but how you all should think about approaching it as well. So if we think about creating competitive advantage, it is about understanding the data asset, but it's also really important to understand how are you going to embed that into your systems that people will use. And so at the end of the day, and this was true historically of AI back when, I was sort of coming up through the professional ranks. But, we used to create AI systems, and in a lot of ways, we would create AI models or algorithms, but they weren't really embedded into applications. So we would have, really interesting algorithm programs that allowed us to be able to do things like, predict, future outcomes potentially, but we were never really embedded them into our workflow applications, our decision-making apparatus of the organization. And that's really an important part of understanding how we create competitive advantage. So we have to figure out now, how do we take the AI that we've created, and it's even easier now in the current world of generative AI because of the accessibility of AI, but also it has to do with the work that Microsoft's done as it relates to creating cloud-based services that allow us to easily create applications and AI infrastructure that allow us to focus on the kinds of things that we can use to create competitive advantage. So it's about the data, it's about the algorithm, it's about incorporating that into your application so you can create and generate the value that you're expecting. Now that value might be related to, maybe it has to do with generation of marketing material, creating competitive advantage as it relates to potentially how do you market yourselves so that you can command better presence in the market? Or maybe you're in, an area where product discovery is an important part of your business to create competitive advantage. So how do you create innovation? How do you identify other areas where you might want to either make investments or try other techniques which might allow you to separate from your competitors? Well, those are really predicated on understanding not only the current techniques that you might be using today, but also understanding your customer base and understanding the industry. And so those become data problems, but it also allows you to focus on what are the kinds of things where you believe, and I'll call it hypothesis or hypothetically, where would you believe could be areas of opportunity, and then using AI capabilities as part of this to be able to either prove or disprove your hypothesis, or to validate whether or not your theories actually are worth investing in. And that's a really important part of this for how we can leverage AI-enabled apps to create this competitive advantage, because now I can try things, I can explore. It's sort of, this is the process of innovation. So how do I know where should I make my investment? How should I, where do I not invest, for example? And AI can really be a big help as it relates to that. So those that really have the ability to take advantage of their own data assets, or even publicly available data assets to understand their industry better, or even their competitors' knowledge or knowledge about their competitors, will allow you to be able to position yourself more effectively. And I think the organizations that can leverage AI in that capacity will be the ones that succeed in creating true competitive advantage. So if I look at it from the perspective of how do I do this, I like to talk about AI-enabled applications, because I just told the story about the fact that in a lot of ways, it's really difficult to take an algorithm that you might have created in a lab environment, excuse me, or in a test environment, and to make that available to an application for true decision-making purposes. So the idea here is to really look at this pyramid of intersection, where we think about, we need the data, we need the mature level of data in order to allow us to be able to perform the AI on the data that we might have collected, and also protect it. And I'm not going to ignore the security aspect of this, but I won't really talk about it too much. It certainly is an important part, but not something that I'll focus on too much here today. But using things like Data Fabric, for example, which allows us on the Microsoft platform, that allows us to be able to then manage, curate, access our data, to create a lakehouse, to be able to know where our data assets are, to improve the integrity and the quality of the data, so that we know when we make decision making, it is predicated on data that we have trust in and we have confidence in. And then, of course, in order to create a consistent and effective user experience, or even access to those AI capabilities, using the modern data platform, modern application platform, allows us to be able to get there easily. And in this case, we'll talk a little bit about kind of like a maturity model concept, but it really has to do with what are your application frameworks? How do you deal with AI-enabled applications framework-wise, in order to be able to create the infrastructure to embed your AI? And that's an important part of understanding how this all works. So let's talk a little bit about how intelligent applications can help, through organizational analytics, create competitive advantage. So the first area we'll talk about is increasing automation and efficiency. So one way to create competitive advantage is to be able to deliver our products and services at a lower price point. So we may look at automation and efficiency techniques that allows us to be able to, say, beat the competition by offering our products at a lower price point. So that's one key advantage, where we can use AI to determine how to do that. We can also look at improved decision making. So where do we make our investments? Where do we allocate our resources? But where do we actually get more involved in particular areas, and then maybe divest from certain areas that might not be as important to us in terms of creating competitive advantage for us across the board. So allowing us to be able to use AI for those purposes really helps us to be able to make sure we're making the right decisions, and that they support our ability to stay and remain competitive. Looking at new products and services, I was talking about this earlier. So new products and services allow us to be able to understand, where have we been successful historically? Where can we provide additional capabilities because we may have a corner on a particular market? Where do we make those investments? And where do we have the personnel and resources to be able to support it? So this can be a primary area for helping us to understand where our current capabilities are, where we can extend those capabilities, and then which products and services would align to that to, again, drive competitive advantage. And then finally, enhanced customer experiences allow us to be able to, as we interact with our customers, to be able to maintain existing customers, but also acquire new ones based off of the experience. Because at the end of the day, while you may not be sort of maybe a B2C style business, even B2B businesses still have interaction points. So enhancing the customer experience doesn't just have to be about a pretty website. It could also be about an efficient process as you look through how do you exchange information or transact with your customer, and that's an important part of this as well. So those are ways that we can think about creating this level of competitive advantage by using analytics. Now, if we think about some of the AI techniques that we might use, and generative AI is the primary mechanism that I was talking about here, but this is a good way to think about it as well. There's lots of enterprise-wide innovation potential that we could think about across those areas of innovation that we just talked about, or across those areas of capability, whether it's operational efficiency, summarization, which allows us to be able to do and make better decisions, or even creating better customer experience, for example, by allowing us to create, to create new environments, whether it's through coding or even through, say, product recommendations or helping our customers to have a better experience. So there's a whole host of these enterprise-wide solutions or capabilities that we can take advantage of and use AI to make the overall nature of competitive advantage for us clear, and investment areas that we can take advantage of that helps us to drive the underlying objectives, which are related to competitive advantage, but underlying all of that has to do either with operational efficiency or creating a degree of competitive advantage by distinguishing you from your competitor. And that's key. So the other thing I like to talk about when we get into this topic is return on investment. So while we may have identified areas in which we could create competitive advantage, whether it's through efficiencies, as I said before, or it's sort of new product definitions or customer experience enhancements, we still want to understand what is it that we would do, excuse me, as we sort of launch into the AI capabilities, or taking advantage of these AI capabilities, and then how would we measure whether or not we're succeeding? So it's not just a measure of, did we create competitive advantage, but is the AI or the AI capabilities that we're creating, do they provide the type of value that we are expecting? And that's really what this is all about. So we can define what the measures are, and notice here, competitive advantage is one of the metrics that we're going to be measuring. But can we define what those measures of competitive advantage might be? For example, maybe it's increased market share in terms of customer base, for example, on our competitors. Maybe that's how we measure competitive advantage. Maybe it's something else. But you would define what those priorities and goals really are as you sort of think about, how do I drive this as a return on investment proposition? So then you sort of move into this exploration phase. How do you identify and validate technologies that you would use? Which techniques would you take advantage of? And then enablement really comes as part of, what data do you have? What strategy do you use? What are the assets that are available to you, whether it's talent, specifically in the context of AI, your cultural, the culture of your organization, maybe it's an innovative culture, or the technology that you might have available to you, i.e. Microsoft or something that will allow you to be able to move fast. And then you kind of move from value creation to value realization. And this is where you start to measure whether or not you're achieving those competitive advantage goals that you would have set. And so this is really where we get into the true representation of value realization, because we're now saying we're measuring quantitatively the fact that we are able to succeed here. And then we can start to exploit that as we think about optimizing, growing, scaling, or reinforcing those key areas where we're seeing competitive advantage. For example, if we're getting mind share within a particular area or part of the industry, we want to continue to grow that. We want to optimize it, leverage it. And then finally, moving toward evolution and innovation. So how do we do more? How do we grow and sustain these kind of investments that we made? And then we can start the cycle all over again. And so that's really an important part of understanding how we think about competitive advantage, but then how do we sort of move into those areas? Now, this is a very complicated slide. I'm not going to get into the details of all of this, but in general, you get the idea. But in different areas, we can think about what are some of those characteristics. Healthcare, for example, being able to do predictive diagnostics, for example, may separate, a particular healthcare organization one from the other within a specialty area that might be of value to them, so they can focus on that. or regulatory monitoring and automation allows you to be able to stay in compliance, because to remain a viable business, because even in healthcare, it's not just about providing services to your patients. It's also about maintaining a viable company or a business. And so you need to make sure that you're not violating regulatory compliances and paying fines, et cetera. I'll take retail as another one. So improving your in-store experiences, making it so that consumers want to go to the store so that they can experience, like an Apple Store, for example, experiencing the environment that allows them to be able to, say, be more interactive with the products that they might want to purchase. Or loyalty programs or chatbots or answering questions. So there's a number of different areas where AI can be applied here. So you can take advantage of a lot of these capabilities, and using AI, certainly in the new world, as it relates to Gen AI and with the democratization of the way that we think about AI, you can move fast in a lot of these different fields and really focus on, like I was just talking about, the true competitive advantage that you're after, and then using these capabilities to be able to drive that forward. And this is just another example of that. So, for example, retail organizations that are using advanced technologies like artificial intelligence for rendering, and also using AR for augmenting the immersion capabilities. For example, in the early days, there were retailers that were doing, this kind of a thing, like I think it was Wayfair started with this, where you could imagine, a couch in your space. And so those kinds of things helped us with just sort of simple augmented reality, but it did help with sales and competitive advantage in terms of, thinking about, furniture sales. Healthcare for diagnoses and efficiency and efficacy in order to allow you to be able to provide better patient care. Financial organizations using it to detect and create rules to stop fraud. So basically, ensure that there's not bad customer experiences, but also protecting the viability of the business as part of a competitive advantage. So, clearly the individual doesn't want to be subject to fraud, but neither does the organization. So, these are really just areas that can be super important. So Steward Healthcare is one of these, an example that I was talking about earlier, where not only is it a hospital network which provides services to in inner city locations, so which is really from I'll call it a human welfare perspective, they are actually providing a real service to the community by providing patient services through the hospital network. And so they really do enable the community in the services that they provide. But they are also a business, and so they can't just provide services at no cost. They want to make sure that they have the ability to understand how can they create operational efficiencies, how can they provide more care and more effective care to their patient base. And so this really has to do with, it's a competitive advantage model. When we think about, how can we look at, understanding the data assets within this hospital network, and then helping them to do things like, how do you predict, for example, patient load out a week at a time? So understanding the types of patients that come into the hospital, and then being able to understand how to align doctors to patients so that you can get a good balance of the right kinds of doctors are on staff to provide the services that are required. So not only is that efficient, but it also improves the performance of the hospital, so people are more likely to use the hospital. The patient stay also, again, reducing the length of stay, meaning that it lowers the overall cost, et cetera, and lots of money saved in this particular example. Similar kinds of things with recommendation engines. So recommendations engines allow particular organizations, in this case, manufacturing organization or for engines, were able to build an ML model, which allowed them to be able to then make predictive recommendations. And, just the outcome I'll kind of jump to here, you can increase pipeline revenue of $15 million, and then $50 million savings over the course of the year. So what does that really mean? That means then that as you sort of create operational efficiencies now, you can offer overall cost of services and products at a lower price point to create competitive advantage, especially in manufacturing is historically a very competitive field. And so this is a way to develop a way to separate yourselves from your competition. So those are really important characteristics of understanding how to create competitive advantage. So I talked a lot about sort of leveraging AI and data to be able to create competitive advantage. And so if you're interested in taking the next step in your journey, scan the QR code, get in touch with us. We'd love to talk more about the use cases that we have and ways that we can help you to be able to create competitive advantage within your own business. Thank you for attending.